Okay, first off, this is Sunday. I think it's the 14th, whatever that means. I want to tell you how overwhelmed I am with the positive response. It is beyond my expectation for sure. I certainly appreciate the encouragement. I love it that many of you have subscribed and have joined in. There are numerous comments about participating, joining, getting things rolling, what to do next. I'll get some things on the board myself, post it here in the next few days, give some kind of response to it. But anyway, I am overwhelmed in any case. Secondly, there is significant news. There's been another Q-Anon posting. Before I go through the posting, I want to tell you I've spent a little more time doing some research on the authenticity of Q, and as any of you who have looked will know, there is both gee, it's real, and gee, it's fake. And some of the real folks are rah-rah, always optimistic, wonderfully Pollyannish, and almost idolizing the whole idea of Q. And others are saying it's fake, and they say everything is fake, and of course they can point to dozens of past occurrences where positive things have come in and they prove not to be true. So both of them have validity. So the fakers, not to give them too much discount, find problems with the syntax, they find problems with writing errors, they see it as amateurish, it looks cryptic, it is cooked as they see it. It is indicative perhaps of artificial intelligence or some kind of Kabbalistic or foreign input. And they look to the history and say, you know, it's just like everything else. It is hopeful porn. I get all that. And with that, I approach it with some skepticism. The flip side of it is it's real. And it hits all the buttons. Most of us who are following it find wonderful assurances that it is meeting our expectations and anticipations about what needs to be done. Some of us have broad strategic ideas, others have tactical ideas. That is, we need things to get fixed in the short term, but we all find some benefit in it. It has predicted numerous times that there are things afoot. That is very helpful. It has given us some hints about Assange. It has shown some arrests. It has given some indication that there are pedophilic roundups, which is very good. There is greater disclosure. The MSM is starting to run and scatter at times. There are political parallels that have been demonstrated. There are, and believe it or not, there are, hold on your hats, hints about UFO information and other disclosures, not necessarily entirely within Q, but within the MSM community, which is fascinating considering that this is a 70-year-old phenomenon which has not gone away. So does it tell us that there's a secret space program or a secret technology that's been hidden from us, or that there is more, that there are other entities out there we've been visited? You know, who knows? And I don't give any kind of absolute response to either of them, but it is curious for any case. Also, that is a big deal, and it's a bigger deal for the people who are solidly for Trump. I guess I am qualifiedly hopeful about Trump. And that is the linkage between the Q posts and the Trump tweets. And sometimes those things, as Q has pointed out, are within a minute or two of each other, 10 or 15 minutes each other, and there is some cross relationships which are beyond what most would see as coincidence. So what are the possibilities as it relates to Q? I mean, the first one is, and this is something that I have looked at, is Twitter using the Trump posts as a format by which to manipulate and post the Q stuff, even with an AI, so that the Trump posts and the Trump tweets and the Q posts look similar or match up or are made to respond to one another, even in the possibility that Trump tweets are being somehow delayed to make the timing all match up. That's a possibility. The second is that Twitter has been hacked and some outside bunch is using and following the Trump posts and or are interfering with the Trump posts to make them work. And the third is, of course, that the two are linked. On the problems that I see with the Twitter interference and or the outsider interference is that if Trump is astute to any of this, even if he has absolutely nothing to do with Q, it would have been called out already, or he would have done something to hedge his own Twitter account to make it less vulnerable. On the other side, obviously, the things that we've discussed. So I lean cautiously on the side of it is real. I had a dear friend who used the term non-coincidence, and non-coincidence is that which could not be coincidence, or which, when repeated over and over again, tells us that something is afoot, and I like it, so I'm hopeful. Secondly, let me give you, first of all, let me give you a reminder as it relates to my whole approach to this, and that is this, which has again been very positively received by many of you who have subscribed and or left messages, and that is, either way we must wake up. Either way we must seek our own best outcomes. Either way we must approach this and follow this. Those of us who are awake and aware and are proactive must recognize that either we will participate and be involved in the positive process that is ongoing, that is to say, give impetus to it, or if this is all garbage, we still need to go forward. I mean, it isn't like, well, Q is fake, so let's not do anything. It's all the more impetus for us to do something, to get involved, to be participatory. And again, the same friend of mine who liked non-coincidences had something which he called benign leaning. And benign leaning was, you see something you like, you see something you want, you see a process that you want to follow through on, and you lean into it and you make opening for it to happen. You make it so that the energy that you give it provides for you to slide into that space when the opening comes. And if this is a process which is working, and it is obvious that there are fringe pieces of it that are working, then we give it benign leading. We push into it. We put our shoulders into the process and we say, no, we're going to make this happen. And I think that's something really helpful. And I will give you some response to Q, which I think perfectly fits that. So late last night, there was a posting which says, next week, bigger, public. We listened. So bigger and public is, on Monday it says next week, bigger, public. So apparently things are going to begin to happen next week. One of the beauties of this Q thing is if it's not real, it's not going to be out there 5 years from now. It's either going to happen within the next few months or it's not. So for those of us who are hopeful, what's the loss? Secondly, it says we listened, 20/80, 40/60, and some of the other Q posters have said 20/80 was 20% our participation, that is citizens being involved, giving impetus, giving energy, and 80% working behind the scenes, under the radar, so to speak. And now it says going toward 40/60, which in other words says, as I see it, and as others have seen it, 40/60 is, we get that you guys are on board. We get that more of you are on board than we expected. We get that there's more energy and impetus on board than you expected. And we will allow for, give opening for, take thanks to the fact that that is happening. So if it works, that's great. The second posting is, you and your families are safe, promise. No matter what we do, we got to go with where it is. And as Catherine Austin Fitts pointed out the other day, there are worse things than dying. There are worse things than stepping up and standing for principle. There are worse things than letting things go. And so I'm not going to get along to go along. I believe with, fight or die. That's the way it is. Step up to the process, be aware of the process, work through the process, and don't be complacent about it. Don't be a sheep. And finally, the third posting was, be ready, MSM coming in a big way. We see all, we hear all. Fight, fight, fight. Conspiracy push coming. MSM lost control. That's the mainstream media, of course. The D lost slave grip. The Democrats have lost their grip. D lost center voters. Democrats have lost their mainstream center voters. The libs are in minority. MSM projects as big movement. Fake news. And 4 to 6% lost forever. I've taken that to mean that the mainstream media is starting to open up, that the lopsided Democratic response to an awful lot of this from the most dysfunctional liberal ends of it are now not resonating with their mainstream voters. And then it says 4 to 6% lost forever. Hello, George. And whether that is George Soros or somebody else, it makes sense that it would be George Soros, because obviously he's behind some of that wild, radical, off-center, liberal, fake liberal process which has taken control over much of the Democratic and mainstream media. So there are really wonderful disclosures. Finally, something that I'm going to approach and process over the next few weeks is history. And as many of you know, many of you do not, the history of this process of the corruption goes back centuries. And the seeds of it began with our own formation, with the Constitutional Congress, with the Constitution, with the banking system, right from the start, right from the 1780s. The War of 1812 is indicative of it. I mean, it's almost impossible to believe that that's the case, but it is. That some of the assassinations, including the attempted assassination on Andrew Jackson, were part of this process and are spikes that tell us in the history that things are not as the history books that we were raised with told us. And so some of you have said, well, what do we want from this? What's your vision of it? And it isn't, of course, that my vision has anything more than one vote, but what I believe we want, most of us, is true freedom. I mean, there is no question that we are, in some senses, pawns to the system right now, and perhaps have no influence on it at all, except with our opposition and with our presence. Secondly, we want full and open disclosure, and that has not been had for many, many years. Perhaps, certainly since before the JFK assassination, probably back before Truman formed a number of these behind-the-scenes federal organizations, and probably even more so clear back to Woodrow Wilson and the early 1900s, at least. We want to expose and remove the corruption. That is, we want to see the congressmen, the executive branch, the administrators that are corrupt to be exposed for it and to be removed, to be shamed out of being here. And that's starting to happen. And as many of you have seen, both in the House and the Senate, there are a large number of folks that have quit or indicated they're not going to run again. And of course, in the corporations, we've seen 20 or 30 odd CEO resignations over the last few months. And this is all part of this same exposure process, as I see it. We want to reinstate our Constitution, and that means all of it. That means all of the freedoms of the Bill of Rights. It means that we are protected, which we are not now. I mean, if you look at the Patriot Act and what happened in the Bush administration and has been fully maintained through all of the Obama administration, so it's not a Democrat or Republican thing, the fundamental basic rights that all of us rely on to be protected for our privacy, to have the right to bear arms, to the freedom of speech, to assemble, and the rest of that, for the right to confront our accusers, for bonds, for attorneys, for the right to know what our charges are, to be able to postpone. All of that has been curtailed, and with the declaration that terrorism is war, in effect, we have activated that Patriot Act for purposes that were totally unintended in the process of the act of war, circumventing or temporarily setting aside our constitutional rights. It is a total destruction in many ways of our rights, and it leaves open the destruction of many more, including the right for us to assemble and to practice our own religious beliefs and everything else. All of that is at risk. So we have the right to all of that. And finally, to remove the Kabbalistic, nefarious, devious, enslaving, banking, corporate cabal, which has been working the process for over 100 years now, but has shifted into high gear over the last 20 years and has taken much of the life, energy, and profit out of this country, and focused it on a few individuals. We have virtually moved from 1970 till now from a very prosperous middle class to a third world country, and the division between the very, very, very wealthy and the rest of the population is getting greater and greater, as everyone has obviously seen. The size of the middle class has dropped by a third. The property and share of ownership of both income and of capital in this country has dramatically reduced, and was vastly reduced by the 2008 fake recession, which I'll talk about later. So in any case, that has to all be reversed. So finally, as I have said before, what I'd like to do is unite the 10 million. And I see us as part of the movement. I don't care what we call it. I call it Unite the 10 million, or Unite 10 million, or even 10 million. But the process that I see is that this avant-garde, proactive, insistent, patriotic approach to the process will draw the rest of the population in, and it is critical to see that this changes, because without changing it, it is going to go away, folks. So thank you for all. As you can obviously tell, I still have not figured out either how to change the video after I've done it, or to figure out how to remotely charge it. So please forgive the fact that I walk on and off the camera. I'll get smarter yet. We'll see. Thanks.